Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Red Donkey Projections. I'm Lucas, and very unfortunately, Eric was not able to record with me today. We had a bunch of scheduling conflicts, unfortunately, so I'll have to be doing our final prediction by myself. But we did discuss this beforehand, and we went through what we thought would happen. I'll just be the one presenting it. So I'll be discussing our final prediction for the 2018 or sorry, 2021 California recall election between Gavin Newsom and a slew of different Republicans. I'll be taking a look at early voting data we have and polling data. Right now, it is 10 p.m. on the East Coast, meaning that the polls will be closing in just 1 hour. So I thought that we'd quickly grind through our final prediction. And with that being said, let's get right into it. So let's start off with the early voting statistics. First, I've got pulled up the 2020 numbers from the 2020 presidential election of who returned their ballots. So as you can see here, 12 million have returned their ballots, 6 million Democrats, 2 million Republicans, and 2 million non-affiliated voters. I'm using this number as a baseline to compare with the 2021 California recall mail-in numbers, so we can give some kind of sense of what the final vote margin will be. Of course, in the 2020 election, it was a huge margin that Joe Biden defeated Donald Trump in this state. So let's look at the current voting numbers that we have right now from the 2021 recall. Right now, 51% of those returned are Democrats, 23% independent, 26% Republican. So these numbers actually look even better for Democrats than they did before in the November election. Although, of course, Republican numbers are slightly higher. And it is important to note that Democrats do tend to vote by mail anyway. So these numbers might look a little bit different after we see all the in-person vote that we get tonight in 1 hour. And this type of number is always up in the air. We saw this happening when we predicted the Georgia runoffs. We always said, we don't know for sure what the election turnout is going to be. We know that it's going to be beneficial to the Republicans. The question is how much, that's really hard to determine. And, of course, there are some people who say that these Democrats might be crossing over to vote yes to recall Gavin Newsom. I would agree with that. I do think that a lot of Democrats, I don't want to say a lot, but some Democrats might really be crossing over to vote yes on the recall and perhaps voting for a Democratic candidate on the replacement question. And I have taken that into account for our final prediction. We're going to also take a look at polls now. Right now, polling has suddenly, shifted away from yes on recall. For a period of time in the summer, it was looking like this race might be competitive because of COVID, because of the unpopularity of Gavin Newsom. But ever since then, it has really bounced back for him. For example, that one Survey USA poll that, we were saying maybe this is an outlier because it did show recalling by 11 points, which we did kind of doubt. And clearly with Trafalgar Group releasing a new poll that has no up by 8 points, at this point, it's pretty safe to say that Gavin probably won't get recalled because, Trafalgar Group is a very right-leaning group, and it wasn't just their poll, but several other polls showing the exact same thing, showing consistently that Gavin Newsom will likely win the recall by a pretty large margin. And the big question is why? Why did he bounce back? Of course, there's numerous factors. One factor being that COVID has gotten better in the state, but the biggest factor here is, in fact, the issue with Larry Elder. Larry Elder is a very far right type Republican candidate. He's running very pro-Trump, very, he said a lot of controversial things about slavery and especially slavery reparations. And that kind of screwed all Republicans over because he provided essentially Democrats almost like a lifesaver, because they're able to toss, they're able to use him essentially in their advertisement saying he said this, he's very far right. And obviously being very far right in such a Democratic state is absolutely going to hurt him. And, the Republican support coalescing behind him ultimately did probably ruin Republicans' chances of wanting to recall Gavin Newsom. I think I was actually discussing this on our Twitter page a couple of days ago. I was discussing how if, Republicans aligned against Kevin Faulconer, who was a much more moderate Republican, perhaps they would have done better. And I think that was one of here it is, Kevin Faulconer. One of the biggest issues with this California GP was they did not back a candidate, which unfortunately for them caused them to basically lose the recall completely because support just went around Larry Elder when Kevin Faulconer probably would have been a better candidate. Although I will say, I do think Gavin Newsom would still have survived a recall, even if Kevin Faulconer was the leading replacement candidate. So before I give our final prediction on whether or not he will be recalled, I thought we'd first give our prediction on what the replacement ballot will look like. So even if Gavin Newsom gets recalled, even if Gavin Newsom does not get recalled, which at this point is looking like the likely result, that we will still see the numbers for the second ballot. So my prediction is going to be Larry Elder taking first because he has gotten a lot of more name recognition under his conservative base. Second, honestly, it might actually go to Kevin Pafford. This YouTuber, Democratic YouTuber who might get enough support. Third, I want to say John Cox because he is getting a lot of name recognition. And then, fourth and fifth, maybe Kevin Faulconer and maybe Caitlyn Jenner on there. So overall, that's not going to matter because if you couldn't tell already, we are predicting that Gavin Newsom will not get recalled. And we are predicting a likely margin. We are moving this from our initial lean back to likely because of Gavin Newsom doing a lot better now in polling with his popularity. And yeah, after a very crazy election season, we start off by saying this was safe because it's California. Why would they vote to recall a Democratic governor? And then it went to lean and likely because, who knows, perhaps a Republican could win and capitalize on his unpopularity. But at this point, we are willing to say it's a likely. And I'm thinking a mid to high likely. I'm thinking 12 to 13 points of a Gavin Newsom victory, given our lookings at the early voting data and the polling data. This is our final decision. And for those of you wondering, I do believe Orange County will flip from, I believe, no, I don't think, I'm not sure whether or not it went to Biden, but I do believe that it will vote to recall Gavin Newsom. Of course, doesn't matter that much. But that is my opinion. I know it's a very controversial topic. Everyone's taking different sides on that, but I think it will recall, but by a very small margin. And with that being said, that's the end of the video for today. Thank you all so much for watching. If you like this episode, please like one. If you like our content, please subscribe. And we'll see you in our next episode tomorrow. See ya.